talk, okay? All right, so first up, Ethalinda Blackman. Speaking for her is Michael Harper. He's a family friend, and Ethalinda was like family to the Harper family. Ethalinda does have a living sister in Florida who's unable to make it today. So Michael, do you want to come up? And Ethalinda was a hand. Her family was part of the hand family from Fort Norris. And she had donated many fabulous historical items to the Historical Society's museum over the years from the Hand family. So we're really pleased to be able to honor her. Michael?
And thanks to the officers and the board members and the volunteers. What an amazing gathering. I have to start by saying you're getting the second string today. My mother was going to do this. She's in a rehab hospital, doing very well. Thank you for your kind thoughts. But she was a Reagan and a Bateman and a Fowler and a Blossom and probably 15 other things, like so many of you in this room. And she really wanted to do this. And this is her talk. So I'm going to be the fake Joan Harper here for a little bit, speaking in her first person. And she would have started this way. Ethalinda Blackman, who was always Ethie to me and my children, was born in the early days of World War II and lived her earliest years in Leesburg, where her father, Carl Blackman, worked in the Del Bay shipyard. I remember that well because my brand new husband, Bert, worked at the Del Bay shipyard in the office right next door to Carl's. But Carl and his wife, Marjorie Hand Blackman, were no strangers to me, nor were the many Blackmans who lived in the neighborhood where I grew up. Just around the corner from my parents' home lived Captain Smith Blackman and his wife, Ethalinda, Ethie's paternal grandparents. Her maternal grandparents were Linda and Harvey Hand, and there were too many to count aunts, uncles, cousins, most of whom married locally and had numerous children. I think that it may be that Ethie is related to more people in the Port Norris Cemetery than anybody in this room. Most of her extended family worked in the oyster industry in one way or another, and of course Captain Blackman's oyster boat was named the Ethalinda Blackman, after his wife, of course, but his granddaughter never complained about having a boat named after her. Many of those members of her extended family are deserving of mention, and luckily for you, I will not try to unwind all that genealogy. But there's one person that stands out because, if nothing else, her influence on Ethie, and that was her Aunt Lucy, a spinster lady, as we would have said at the time, who for generations looked after the nursery in the little Methodist church, including my three children, Mary Annie and I and our sister Emily, and Mary Annie and me. Lucy also worked at Del Bay during the war years, and her personal journal and letters. Technology's your friend, always remember that. Her personal journal and letters are a history of that bit of the war effort and the men and women who built the boats and their captains. But I like to think that Lucy, who was a strong, independent, and a bit of an unconventional woman, was a perfect role model for Ethie, and they were lifelong friends. From Leesburg, Ethie's family moved back to Port Norris, where she began her education in the old elementary school, and later moved to Greenwich, where her father Carl and his brother-in-law operated the shipyard. After 8th grade, she attended Bridgeton High School, beginning her lifelong love affair with women's athletics, playing leading roles on championship basketball and hockey teams in what truly can be described as the golden age of BHS's women's sports. Lots and lots of banners that really truly still hang in the gym. And it was there that she met her athletic coaches and teachers, Fanny Cowell, Jean Hoyer, Sophie Amorano, who instilled so much of her values and love for athletics that she would later pass on to countless women. It was at that point in our intersecting lives that Bert and I needed a babysitter, and Ethy became part of our extended family. In those days, more than 60 years ago, there were no late buses for athletes, so Ethy spent many afternoons at our home waiting for a ride home, and she literally moved in to take care of us when Mom and Dad needed to be out of town. My daughters, Emily and Mary Annie, found her to be a perfect role model and confidant, and my now 75-year-old son Michael still has a crush on Ethy. Mother, you didn't have to say that. But of course she was my first love. Ethy aspired to be a phys ed teacher and attended Trenton State Teachers College and began her teaching career in Vineland for 2 years, after which she joined the Peace Corps and went to Venezuela, where she served for 2 years, and then to the Ohio State University, as we're told to say it, where she got her master's. And her next move was her last, moving to a teaching position in Midland, Michigan, where she taught phys ed until her retirement. It was in Midland that Ethy met her life partner, Veronica, and they enjoyed many years together, teaching, community service, tending their home in Midland, spoiling cats, gosh, they were cat ladies, and relaxing in their cabin up in the woods in Grayling. Veronica was the fly fisher, and I can really imagine Veronica out there in her waders in an ice-cold stream, but I can't imagine Ethy doing that. She must have been the one who cooked the fish. Her passions included strong support for the Humane Society. She was a voice for equal rights and voting access. She was on a branch of the family tree that wasn't growing, but she always made time to come back and help take care of the old ones. Not surprisingly, her bringing up had taught her to make do. I remember one time when I suggested that her car was getting too decrepit for the long trips back to Port Norris, where she and Veronica spent time in the summer to look after her mother Marjorie and Aunt Lucy, helping to maintain her grandmother's house next to the old parsonage on Main Street. So I said, Ethy, you really need a new car. And she replied, Joan, it still has less than 200,000 miles on it. Making do. If Ethy were here today, she, a lifelong educator, would be proud to see her name on the library. But I'm guessing that if she knew she was to be a legend, she would have blushed and said, surely you can find somebody more deserving than me. She was a genuinely humble person, fun to be with. I always found it to be a joy with her in my home here or when I visited her in Michigan. Ethy would tell us that she was just an ordinary woman, a woman of not much importance. But we should not forget that throughout her life, she touched thousands of lives as a teacher, a coach, a mentor, a role model, a volunteer, a friend. She inspired women of all ages to be strong, to follow their dreams, to be responsible citizens, parents, and family members, and to be leaders in their lives. Never having children, those women whose lives she touched are truly her legacy, and her spirit will live on here as one of our legends. She was a dear friend and a loving daughter and an amazing big sister. Thank you for letting me share my memories of this extraordinary woman.